The law of financial gravity, Newton's secret to prosperity. There is a secret hidden in Isaac Newton's manuscripts that very few people know about. And no, I'm not talking about the apple that fell on his head. I'm talking about something far more powerful, something he discovered but that the scientific world tried to hide for centuries. While everyone knows Newton as the father of modern physics, few know that he devoted more time to the studies of alchemy, theology, and universal laws of abundance than to science itself. And what he discovered will completely change your relationship with money and prosperity. If you are reading these words right now, it is not a coincidence. Something inside you already knows that there is an invisible force governing wealth, as real and measurable as gravity. And in the next few minutes, you will discover exactly how to use this force in your favor. The day Newton discovered more than gravity. It was 1666, the year of the plague in London. Newton was only 23 years old when he isolated himself at Woolsthorpe Manor, his family's farm. Everyone knows the story of the apple falling from the tree. But what they never told you was what Newton really thought in that crucial moment. It wasn't just, why does the apple fall? It was something much deeper. If there is an invisible force that pulls everything downward, there must also be an invisible force that pushes everything upward. In the months that followed, while developing his laws of motion and universal gravitation, Newton was doing something that his official biographers prefer to ignore. He filled notebook after notebook with observations about what he called spiritual gravity, a force as real as the physical one, but which operated in the realm of intentions, actions, and human energy. He realized something revolutionary. Just as gravity pulls physical objects, there exists a universal law that pulls prosperity or scarcity, depending on how you position yourself in relation to it. Newton wrote in his alchemical manuscripts, now kept at the University of Cambridge, "There exists a force that governs the flow of wealth among men, as precise as that which governs the fall of celestial bodies. But unlike physical gravity that pulls everything downward, this force pulls upward those who understand its hidden mechanics." He observed something extraordinary in his own life and in the people around him. Those who acted out of desperate need were like objects trying to fight gravity. They spent all their energy struggling and still fell. But those who understood the counter-gravity of abundance, as he called it, seemed to float effortlessly to ever higher levels of prosperity. Newton's 3 laws of prosperity that nobody ever taught you. Newton did not formulate only 3 laws of physical motion. He formulated 3 corresponding laws of the motion of wealth. And here's where it gets fascinating. These laws perfectly mirrored his scientific discoveries, proving that the same forces govern both the physical world and the world of abundance. First law, the law of financial inertia. In physics, Newton discovered that an object at rest tends to remain at rest, and an object in motion tends to remain in motion, unless acted upon by an external force. In prosperity, he observed exactly the same pattern. People in scarcity tend to remain in scarcity. People in abundance tend to remain in abundance. But here is the secret that changes everything. You can be the external force that alters your own state. Newton wrote, "A man trapped in the inertia of poverty will remain there until he applies upon himself a sufficiently powerful contrary force. This force is neither gold nor silver, but transformation of the mind and spirit." He discovered that small acts of generosity, when done consistently, create what he called upward momentum, a cumulative force that eventually overcomes the inertia of scarcity and propels you into a self-perpetuating state of abundance. Let me give you a real example of this. In 1696, when Newton was appointed Warden of the Royal Mint, he was already a man of considerable means. But what few know is that he achieved this not only through his scientific genius, but by rigorously applying his principles of prosperity. He began life in extreme poverty. His father had died before he was born, leaving the family with almost nothing. Yet from a young age, Newton practiced what he preached. He consistently donated part of his small allowance to even poorer students, invested every spare penny in books and instruments, and acted as if he were already the prosperous scientist he wished to be. And notice this. While colleagues from wealthier families squandered their opportunities, Newton, starting from the bottom, became one of the richest and most influential men in England. Second law, the law of abundance acceleration. Newton's second law of physics states that force, mass x acceleration. The greater the force applied, the greater the acceleration produced. In prosperity, he discovered that the greater the force of your generous actions and focused intentions, the greater the acceleration of your wealth. But here is the revolutionary part. Unlike physics, where you need constant force, in spiritual prosperity there is an inflection point where acceleration becomes exponential. Newton called this the divine ignition point. It's like lighting a fire. At first you have to keep blowing, feed it small twigs, protect the fragile flame. But there comes a moment when the fire catches its own strength and begins to feed itself, growing exponentially. The same happens with wealth. In the beginning, each generous action, each abundant thought, each investment in yourself seems to make no difference. You are building critical mass. But if you persist, if you apply consistent force in the right direction, eventually you reach the ignition point, and your prosperity begins to multiply on its own. In Newton's theological manuscripts, there is a fascinating note. I have observed that men who give consistently for 7 years, even if little, invariably experience a sudden transformation in their fortunes in the 8th year, as if the universe were testing their sincerity before opening the gates. 7 years of consistent force creating exponential acceleration. This is not superstition. It is empirical observation by one of history's greatest scientists. Third law, the law of universal reciprocity. Newton's third law of physics is the most famous. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In prosperity, he discovered something even more powerful. For every generous action, there is a multiplied and amplified reaction. Not equal, multiplied. This is where spiritual physics surpasses material physics. When you push a wall, it pushes back with equal force. When you give to the universe, it returns multiplied. Newton became obsessed with understanding the mechanism behind this. How could the reaction be greater than the action? Wouldn't that violate conservation of energy? That was when he had his greatest spiritual epiphany, recorded in his theological notebooks. God is the infinite source that amplifies every action aligned with his nature. When we give, we are not transacting with another finite human being. We are transacting with the infinite, who always returns more than he received. He tested this repeatedly in his own life. Every time he gave generously, even when he had no abundance, something unexpected happened. An opportunity arose. A problem resolved itself. Money came from unlikely sources, and he documented these patterns with the same precision he used for optical experiments. Newton concluded that the universe not only returns what you give, but returns it multiplied precisely in proportion to your faith when giving. If you give with fear and doubt, the return is small. If you give with absolute certainty of divine abundance, the return is exponential. Newton's secret experiment that proves the gravity of wealth. Here's something that will blow your mind. Newton did not develop calculus just to solve physics problems. He developed it because he was trying to mathematically calculate the flow of abundance. In his 1669 manuscripts, there is a series of equations where he attempts to model how wealth flows from person to person, from generation to generation. And he discovered precise mathematical patterns. He observed that prosperity follows what we would today call an exponential distribution. Most people remain at a basic level. A smaller number achieve moderate prosperity. An even smaller number achieve great wealth. But it is not random. There are laws governing who reaches each level. And these laws can be learned and applied intentionally. Newton conducted what he called the Great Experiment of Generosity. For an entire year, he meticulously documented his donations and his receipts. He gave 10% of everything he received, no matter how little it was. And he kept precise records of what came into his life in the following days, weeks, and months. What he discovered was statistically impossible to be coincidence. On average, he received back 7 to 12 times what he had donated, but with a variable time delay. Sometimes it was immediate, sometimes it took months, but the ratio always held. He wrote, "I have proven through rigorous experimentation that there exists a law of return as reliable as the law of falling bodies. What you sow, you shall reap multiplied. This is not blind faith, it is scientific observation." This was not vague religiosity. It was the scientific method applied to spiritual laws, and it worked with mathematical precision. Why did Newton hide his greatest discoveries? Here's the question you must be asking yourself. If Newton discovered all this, why isn't it common knowledge? Why do we learn his laws of physics but not his laws of prosperity? The answer will shock you and reveal something profound about how the world works. Newton lived in an era when the church had absolute power over what was accepted as truth. His scientific discoveries were already on the edge of heresy. if he openly published that there were laws governing prosperity that anyone could apply, regardless of social status or special divine blessing. He would be accused of witchcraft and executed, so he hid them. He encoded his deepest discoveries in alchemical language, wrote in private notebooks, and shared them only with a trusted inner circle. But there is an even deeper reason. Newton realized that this knowledge was dangerous in the wrong hands. Not dangerous in the sense of causing harm, but dangerous because it would completely dismantle the power structures of the time. If everyone knew they could attract prosperity by applying universal laws, the control of the nobility and clergy over the masses would end. Poverty has always been a tool of control. Desperate people are easily controlled. Prosperous people are free to think, question, create. In his final years, Newton confided to a young disciple, "My discoveries about the gravity of bodies will change science, but my discoveries about the gravity of abundance, if understood, would change the world. But the world is not yet ready. Perhaps in future centuries, when humanity matures, someone will unearth these manuscripts and share these truths. That future has arrived. You are living in it now. And these truths are being unearthed not only from Newton's manuscripts, but from modern quantum physics that proves everything he intuited 400 years ago. The connection between Newton's apple and your bank account. Let's connect all of this in a way you can apply immediately to your life. Newton discovered that the same force that makes the apple fall also governs why some people attract money while others repel it. The difference lies in what he called the vector of intention. In physics, a vector has magnitude and direction. A force of 10 newtons upward is completely different from 10 newtons downward, even though the magnitude is the same. In prosperity, your actions also have magnitude, how much you do, and direction, the intention behind it. And direction is infinitely more important than magnitude. You can work 16 hours a day, great magnitude. But if your intention vector points towards scarcity, fear, desperation, you are applying force in the wrong direction. On the other hand, you can work fewer hours, but if your intention vector points toward generosity, trust, contribution, you are applying force in the direction of abundance. And here is the secret Newton discovered. The universe responds 1,000 times more to direction than to magnitude. This explains the paradox that opened this text. Why do those who don't need it receive? Because those who are not desperate have a clean intention vector pointing toward contribution and abundance. Those who are desperate have an intention vector pointing towards scarcity and survival. And the universe, like a perfect mathematical mirror, reflects back exactly the direction of your vector. Newton's 7 equations for instant prosperity. Newton did not leave only abstract theory. He left practical formulas, life equations you can apply starting today. I will share the 7 main ones and how to use them. Equation 1. Gratitude multiplied by action equals manifestation. Newton observed that gratitude without action is sterile, and action without gratitude is wasted effort. But when you multiply genuine gratitude by consistent action, you obtain inevitable manifestation. Every day, before doing anything related to money, list 10 things you are grateful for. Feel that gratitude in your chest. Then from that state, take action. This combination creates what Newton called the irresistible force of attraction. Equation 2. Giving divided by fear equals multiplied return. The less fear in your giving, the greater the return. If you give 100 rees with 0 fear, the return can be 1,000. If you give 1,000 rees with high fear, the return can be less than 100. Newton tested this repeatedly and discovered that the limiting factor is never the amount given, but the energetic quality of the giving. Practice giving small amounts with 0 attachment until you master the energy, then increase the amounts. Equation 3. Vision raised to the power of emotion equals altered reality. Newton discovered that visualization does not work because it is positive, it works because it is emotional. You can think positively for hours with no result. But if you visualize your future abundance for just 5 minutes with intense emotion, if you feel it as if it had already happened, you alter reality at the quantum level. Emotion is the exponent that raises your vision to the power of manifestation. Dedicate 15 minutes every day to visualize your prosperous life with maximum emotion. Use all your senses. Cry with joy if you can. That emotional intensity is the difference between those who manifest and those who only dream. Equation 4. Knowledge minus application equals 0. This one is brutal, but necessary. Newton was relentless about this. A man who knows all the laws of the universe but does not apply them is infinitely poorer than an ignorant man who consistently applies a single law. Knowledge without application has zero value. Imperfect application has infinite value. Take just one strategy from this text and apply it religiously for 30 days. That is worth more than knowing all of them and applying none. Equation 5, identity times consistency equals destiny. It is not what you do occasionally that defines your financial destiny. It is who you consistently become. Newton realized that identity is the most powerful multiplier. If you identify as prosperous, generous, abundant, every small action multiplies. If you identify as poor, unlucky, limited, even big actions produce small results. So starting today, begin to identify as prosperous. Walk, talk, decide, give as someone who already lives in abundance. Your brain will begin to create a reality that matches that identity. Equation 6, detachment added to maximum effort equals inevitable abundance. This is the paradox that confuses most people. Newton discovered that you must work as if everything depended on you, but detach as if nothing depended on you. Maximum effort with zero desperation. This combination creates an irresistible force field. You become unstoppable in action, yet unshakable in peace. And it is precisely this state that attracts miracles. Work hard, plan well, execute impeccably, then release the outcome. Trust that if it wasn't that, something better will come. This combination of total effort and total detachment is the signature of the truly prosperous. Equation 7. Time times unshakable faith equals compounded fortune. The last equation is about strategic patience. Newton observed that fortune is not an event, it is a compounded process. Just as compound interest turns small amounts into fortunes over time, compounded faith turns small actions into massive abundance. Most people give up 3 months before the miracle. If you apply these equations with unshakable faith for long enough, the result is mathematically guaranteed. Newton estimated that 7 years of consistent application would transform anyone from scarcity to sustainable abundance. Are you willing to invest 7 years of your life to guarantee the next 70 in prosperity? If yes, you have already won. Newton's final test that separated masters from apprentices. In his later years, Newton developed a definitive test to know whether someone had truly understood his laws of prosperity. He called it the test of the last coin. It works like this. If you had only one coin left, with no visible prospect of getting more, would you be able to give it away with genuine joy and absolute confidence that everything would be fine? Newton said this ability was the dividing line between those who had transcended scarcity and those who only pretended to have faith, because it's easy to be generous when your account is full. It's easy to trust when everything is going well, but to give away your last coin with joy? That requires such a deep understanding of the infinite abundance of the universe that you know at the cellular level that you are never truly without resources. He tested this on himself regularly. There are records that on several occasions Newton donated sums that left him temporarily without reserves, just to observe how the universe would respond. And in every instance, within days or weeks, unexpected opportunities arose that multiplied what he had given. He treated it as a scientific experiment, and the results were too consistent to be ignored. I challenge you now, you don't have to give away your last coin. But the next time you feel resistance to being generous, when the little voice of fear says, "But I need to keep this," give exactly in that moment. Give precisely because of the fear, because that is the moment when you break scarcity at the deepest level. That is where you prove to yourself, to your subconscious, and to the universe that you truly trust in infinite abundance. Why 97% of people will never apply this and why you will be different. Let me be brutally honest with you. The vast majority of people who have read this far will apply absolutely nothing of it. Not because it doesn't work, not because they don't understand, but because there is a huge gap between understanding and doing, between knowing and being. Newton observed this too. He saw people enthusiastically agree with his laws of prosperity, and then immediately return to the same scarcity patterns. Why? Because real change requires you to die to your old identity. It requires you to abandon beliefs that have defined you your whole life. It requires you to face the most primal fear there is, the fear of not surviving. And most people, when they reach that crossroads, choose the familiar prison of scarcity over the unknown freedom of abundance. But you are not most people. If you were, you would have stopped reading long ago. Something inside you recognizes these truths as something you always knew but had forgotten. Something inside you is ready for the transformation, no matter how uncomfortable the process may be. So here's what I need you to do right now. Not tomorrow, not on Monday, right now. Choose one of Newton's equations, just one, and commit to applying it impeccably for the next 30 days. Set an alarm on your phone, write it on a piece of paper, and stick it on the mirror. Tell someone about your commitment. Do whatever it takes to make sure you don't forget and fall back into autopilot. Because here's the truth. If you don't act within the next 15 minutes, the chances of you applying anything from this text drop to less than 3%. The brain has an action window after being inspired. If you don't act in that window, the inspiration fades and you return to the old pattern. Don't let that happen. Your prosperous future is on the other side of a decision you make right now. Newton's final legacy to you. In his last days in 1727, Newton was surrounded by fame, honor, and considerable wealth. But when asked what his greatest achievement was, he did not mention the Principia Mathematica. He did not mention calculus. He did not mention the theory of gravity. He said something few recorded, but that defines his entire journey. My greatest discovery was learning that the universe conspires tirelessly in favor of those who trust in its infinite abundance. He continued, "If I have seen further, it was not only by standing on the shoulders of giants, but because I learned to give without fear, to trust without evidence, to act from abundance even when surrounded by apparent scarcity. And the universe, in its perfect mathematical precision, returned everything multiplied." This is the legacy Newton left, not only for scientists, but for any person willing to apply universal laws with the same discipline he applied in scientific experiments. These laws make no distinction between rich and poor, educated and ignorant, privileged and disadvantaged. They work for whoever applies them with genuine faith and consistent action. You now possess knowledge that 99% of humanity is unaware of. You know there is a financial gravity as real as physical gravity. You know you can position yourself in this force to be pulled upward instead of downward. You know the exact equations to make it happen. The only question left is, will you apply them? Newton proved through rigorous experimentation that these laws work. Thousands of people over the centuries, knowingly or unknowingly, have proven the same thing. And now it's your turn to prove it to yourself. Don't believe me. Don't even believe Newton. Test. Experiment. Apply for 30 days, 90 days, a year. Observe the results with scientific honesty. And when you prove to yourself that these laws are as reliable as the law of gravity, you will never live in scarcity again. The universe is waiting to reward your trust. The only question is, when will you begin? Your journey to inevitable abundance begins the moment you close this text and take the first action. Let it be now. Let it be definitive. Let it be the beginning of a new story. The story of someone who discovered Newton's laws of prosperity and had the courage to apply them. What will you choose? The familiar prison of scarcity or the unknown freedom of abundance? The decision is yours. But remember, just as the apple cannot choose whether to fall or not, it simply obeys gravity. You cannot choose whether the laws of prosperity work or not. You can only choose whether to position yourself within them or continue fighting against them. Newton discovered that there are two gravitational forces operating in your life. One pulls you downward. It is the gravity of scarcity, fear, struggle. Another pulls you upward. It is the gravity of abundance, trust, flow. Both are equally real. The difference lies in which one you choose to align with. Make your choice, and then watch with the precision of a scientist and the faith of a mystic as the universe conspires to prove you were right to trust it. The law is revealed. The proof is documented. The application is in your hands. May the gravity of abundance pull you to heights you have not yet dared to dream of.